Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest ARK Ageing programme and social policy webinar, which coincides very nicely with National Intergenerational Week. My name is Gemma Carney. I'm disciplinary lead for social policy here at the School of Social Sciences, Education and Social Work, and a member of the ARK Ageing team at Queen's. Together with my ARK Ageing colleague, Paula Devine, I'm really pleased today to introduce our guest speaker, Professor Susan Pickard. Susan's Professor of Sociology at the University of Liverpool. She's also head of department at the moment, so we're really pleased that she's managed to take some time to speak to us today. Before I introduce Susan, I'd like to introduce our discussant, the inimitable and unique Angel Leira Pernas, who is a PhD student on the ARK Ageing programme. Ankel's work is supervised by Leonie Hannon and myself, and his thesis will explore how material culture allows us to understand ageing in different social contexts. So his work speaks very nicely to Susan's. Personally, I admire Susan's work for lots of different reasons, not least her incredible acuity in terms of expressing how age is, and I quote, a socially constructed vehicle for inequality, as she calls it. That quotation is from Susan's 2016 monograph, Age Studies, a sociological examination of how we age through the life course, a book that has been described by none other than Stephen Katz as a scholarly tour de force that brings into focus various disciplines, histories, literatures and knowledges that have transformed us into modern subjects of age. It's this quality in Susan's work, this ability to articulate and make visible the many subtle negative associations between aging and social status that shines through in the paper she's going to give us today, which is entitled Age as the New Class War, Contemporary Representations of Intergenerational Inequity. The paper was published in the Journal of Social Policy in 2019 and provides insightful analysis into how the press present us as in the midst of a generational war zone. Before I hand over to Susan, please can I remind you to keep yourselves on mute with the cameras off until Susan is finished speaking. She'll speak for about 40 minutes, then we'll have a 5-minute response from Angel. We will then have 15 minutes left for questions and answers, so write your questions into the chat box. You can do that at any stage during the webinar. Just to remind you that we're recording this webinar and that it will be available on ark.ac.uk, our website, soon. So I'm going to hand over to Susan.
So much, Gemma. Thanks for the very, very warm and generous introduction, which is, has me blushing here, but fortunately no one can see me. And thanks to everyone for turning up on a Friday afternoon, which is very difficult after a week spent for many of us on Zoom. So many, many thanks for giving your time this afternoon. So let me just see if I can share my screen. Marvelous. Yeah, so as Gemma has pointed out, generational antagonisms and generational war is the subject of this talk, and I think obviously it's a themed week, so it's very relevant for this particular week. But I think it's particularly great to be able to talk about this at this point in time, because it seems to me very much, it's based on a paper that I wrote that was published in 2019. But generational antagonisms have hardened since I wrote the paper, and I would say that generational antagonisms have hardened considerably since probably 2010. So the last decade, they seem to be getting worse. And there are various reasons for that. Various events have been sort of instrumental in shaping this discourse, if you like, such as austerity. Brexit is another one. And of course, COVID and lockdown, or the government's response, Western government's response to COVID, is very much another focus for this so-called age war. Although, as I will argue, this is a deflection from the real societal causes for the hardship that people across the age spectrum are currently suffering. So that's really what I'm going to argue in this paper. And I'm going to talk about representations, not necessarily reflective of how people at large feel, but I'm going to argue that representations are very, very important in shaping people's perception of age war and encouraging people to think along these lines. So, yeah, the newspaper and media influence on this subject is particularly important in the UK. I'll be concentrating on the UK. We can see this in other countries too. The US is another very important example of a kind of age war discourse being promoted by the media, but there are other examples in countries such as Australia, indeed Ireland and Poland. I think some papers have been written on all those countries, but I'll be concentrating on the UK. And yeah, the media is significant in shaping public attitudes towards older age groups and towards younger age groups. So this isn't new, but I really do believe that it is very noticeable that it's been the kind of business of particular columnists in particular newspapers to have made this into quite a powerful discourse. The whole idea of generational antagonisms and intergenerational inequity is not a new one, having said that. In fact, we can trace this whole idea of generational unfairness back to discourses around, that have emerged even at the beginning of the establishment of the welfare state in the UK, where there was a concern that older people would take more than their fair share of the National Health Service and welfare. And this was a concern of policymakers at the time and of social policy commentators such as Richard Titmuss and others. I'm not sure that it was something that was particularly dominant in newspapers or public discourse and public representations in the way it has been of late. But you can definitely trace it as a discourse in the 80s and 90s. Particularly in the US, it's really started in the US. But before austerity, around 2008 or 9, it centered quite sort of single-issuedly, if you like, on the idea that older people were potentially burdens on the rest of the citizens and taxpayers. But it became more fragmented and more complex after 2009 and austerity. And then it switched to negative representations of third ages, so the privileged, the youthful, the successfully aging older people, the third ages, and the emphasis was on privilege and the kind of unfairness around their privileged status. It's not to say that the idea that older people are a burden that has disappeared at all. That also coexists with this privilege burden. So you still have this idea that the fourth ages are taking more than their fair share of public resources. But it's very much alongside this idea of privilege. And I would say that, privilege has been unusually highlighted in public discourse over the last 5 years in particular. So as I say, individual columnists are very significant claims makers. And strangely enough, or not that strangely, I will argue, but it seems very counterintuitive that this has been particularly the case in the progressive media. And here I'm talking about the Guardian newspaper in the UK that I've had a particular beef with when I've noticed the way that they present issues of public interest and inequity and inequality. It's very much framed around an age war discourse, but this is echoed in left-wing progressive media on the other side of the Atlantic. So you'll find it in the New York Times, you'll find it in the Atlantic and various sort of hipster online papers of great influence or in the States. But it's not that unusual, though it seems counterintuitive. It actually is pretty logical because its origins lie in modernity itself. So, if you like, cultural antipathy to aging and old age is very much a part of modernity's philosophical approach, and it permeates our intellectual tradition. It's part of this sort of binary coupling, the kind of the positive and the negative binary coupling that we have as part of our way of looking at the world. So, you know, in the sort of dualistic approach to the world, it falls on the wrong side, along with women, for example, and people of other races, and the body rather than the mind. It's one of those negative, problematic binary ideas. But modernity, particularly post-industrial modernity, has favoured progress, has placed youth on the side of progress. You know, sort of in post-industrial time, in industrial times, and particularly post-industrial times, advertising and the kinds of sort of metaphors that appeared very much associated youth with all the things that society valued and consumerist society values, such as speed, efficiency, productivity, innovation. All of that could be seen as a metaphor for youth. And on the other side of that binary, older people were considered to be associated with obsolescence and conservatism, if you like, the kind of, with a small c, the kind of emphasis on things as usual, the status quo. And of course, obsolescence and innovation and new products are, you know, very much part of our not just our attitude towards production, but very much our attitude towards society and life in general. It has, as Mark sort of said, permeated the way we see the world. And I think this is the kind of discrimination that is less likely to be picked up, unfortunately, in sociological studies, which is like most kind of disciplines that were developed in the 19th century and earlier 20th century, imbued with ideas of modernity. Sociology tends to see categories in terms of not in terms of dynamism. They're kind of fixed categories. So the way social theory looks at the world, it looks at the world as and it looks at identity and categories like associated with identity and gender and anything you can think of, almost in terms of categories that don't change. They're fixed. They don't change. They can change for individuals, but they're not. There's not an inbuilt understanding that these categories change as we move through the life course. So we tend to have a static understanding of social theory and of social problems, which is something that we in gerontology and age studies are doing our utmost to rework, if you like, and to say that time, temporality, and particularly a life course framework has to be introduced into the way we see social problems and indeed and the theories that we use to understand the world. And one of the systems, one of the forms of stratification and inequality that is very much overlooked, and indeed it's very rarely discussed at all in social policy and sociological literature, is that of the age system. So you'll have lots of discussions on class, race, gender, sexuality, disability, and very often the role that age plays, not just old age, but the role that age plays as a kind of grid of stratification is totally overlooked in analyses. Because the age system isn't just about old age. This is why, you know, when we look at generational antagonisms, we also have to understand that youth is being manipulated in a certain degree within this age system. So the age system is about really the way the life course is brought in as a kind of subtle way to naturalize inequalities that are anything but natural. They are, as Gemma pointed out in the introduction, you know, socially constructed. So the age system operates through a relational hierarchy of ages and stages, with prime of life adulthood as the kind of the principal, the primary perspective. They're at the top of the hierarchy. Prime of life adulthood, by the way, is something that lasts much longer for men, women kind of drop off this idea of prime of life adulthood at least 10 years before men do, because they are aged before men are aged. So it operates through the framework of the life course, which organises groups according to seemingly natural attributes and norms. As I say, there's an idea that the progress and productivity is associated with the youthful self. It is a metaphor that describes youth. So the neoliberal subject has to be youthful to be productive. Successful aging is not aging at all, it's maintaining youthful qualities. So that we have now, in terms of old age, a third age, which is basically a productive younger age that holds on as long as possible to all the attributes associated with youth, and the fourth age, which is corresponds to the kind of obsolescent stage, if you like. And this kind of system makes certain attitudes and certain policies seem natural. It makes ageism seem natural because, obviously we become less valuable as we grow older, according to this system and according to all the metaphors and ideas it brings with it. And it's the idea that obviously, for example, on a more trivial level, obviously beauty is associated with youth. Obviously, speed and efficiency are associated with youth. And obviously, the older worker is not as productive as the younger worker. So these are the kinds of things that are almost implicit and ensure that ageism is almost something that people don't notice in a variety of contexts, but at the same time, it puts great pressure on young people to be doing certain things or to be have a certain set of attributes, which really don't work well for any stage of the life course. Okay, so that's kind of very, very, very short introduction to the theoretical underpinnings to the paper, if you like. So now I'll talk a bit about the methodology of the paper that I wrote in 2019 and explain how I've updated it a little bit to bring into the discussion the COVID and post-COVID landscape. So the paper was based on a trawl of the literature, a trawl of newspapers, particularly The Guardian and The Telegraph, as representing a more progressive left-wing and a more conservative right-wing readership and columnists' approach politically. And I've looked at these in as many examples of columns and articles as I could between those years, using specific terms such as generation, boomer, millennial, injustice, age war, all as many terms as seemed appropriate to generate these particular articles. And then I looked at what they said. And I looked at particularly rhetorical and figurative approaches. So the rhetorical kind of approach is a more emotive approach. It uses strategies, and particularly found amongst columnists, through which it tries to persuade its audience of the inevitability and correctness of its argument by emphasizing certain features at the expense of others. So they're often quite selective. And figurative is quite similar in a way, but it's more about a caricature. It's more about looking at the proliferation of certain highly condensed images of both older generations and younger generations, and how the figurative approach suggests that this kind of caricature, almost like cartoons, and it's interesting because obviously newspapers still produce daily cartoons, but it crystallizes certain stereotypical attributes, and it works by proliferation. So you tend to see these across different newspapers and beyond. So you'll see them in literature, you'll see them in movies, maybe you'll see them in online platforms, and you'll tend to be convinced by this at a more emotional and intuitive level. And I also broadened my approach outside 2014 to 2017. I looked at other newspapers such as The Atlantic, such as New York Times, and other newspapers, but I particularly concentrated on these. And as I mentioned earlier, I was very disappointed to find that The Guardian and other progressive publications in particular blamed, or the weight of their opprobrium in terms of generational justice came onto the third age. Apologies, by the way, you can probably hear my email pinging. I don't know how to turn it off. I think that's, I don't know, I think that's probably part of my, the cross I bear at the moment being head of department. I'm having hundreds of these, so please bear with me. But so The Guardian particularly emphasised the generational injustice relating to privilege and the third age. And it emerged through four themes that I found going across a number of different articles. And I'll come on to these four themes in a minute. But I was also interested in the kind of rhetorical flourishes, the tenor, if you like, of the discourse, the language used, the emotive rhetoric, and the binary couplets. As I said before, that's very much a way that categories and classifications operate in terms of modernity. So you will often have a hero and a villain. You'll have the right way of doing things, and you'll have the villain of the piece. And very often older people were served as the villain of the piece in a way I will show you, using language as well. This was a theme produced by star commentators, some of their most publicly well-known, almost celebrity commentators, if you like. People like Owen Jones, Barbara Allen, various other people, and also commentators that came from politics and public discourse, public intellectuals, if you like. People like Will Hutton and ex-cabinet ministers and so on, but also their regular columnists. And I'd say I've updated this, and I'll talk about the newspaper reports on age war as they feature in COVID after I've talked about these four themes, which are staples, and I'll show how the COVID discourse has built on these four themes, or at least two of these four themes so far, and it continues to evolve. So you'll see here terms used, in a kind of binary couplet, terms used to describe the old and the young respectively in the Guardian newspaper between 2014 and 2017. You can find these through numerous articles. So the old are often described as brazen, the young as clobbered. You've got conservative versus precariat, hoarding versus shafted, rejoicing versus, well, I should read institutionalized beggars. So you often have, and I'll come on to some photographic imagery, but you also often have the idea of older people sitting back, counting their money and laughing at the thought of their investments. And you have younger people, looking broke and destitute. Grey power versus the jilted young. Social arthritis versus the flexible or adaptable young. Gilded old, the struggling young. The old of the past, the young of the future. That is a very, very common, almost, I don't think columnists even realize that these are metaphors rather than social, than the natural, indisputable truths. I really don't think they realize. You have the old as selfish, and as a result of that, the young as suffering from mental illness as a result of the situation and context they find themselves in, which is the fault of the boomers and older. You have the short-sighted old, the stressed young, leisurely old, busy young, the gerontocracy versus the marginalized. And yeah, these terms are still, as I'll show you, appear in discussions around COVID too. So talking about the four themes that I identified across many articles during this time and since and previous to that, but particularly starting around after 2010, four themes. So the first one was that of the old as having a greater political influence than the young. The second thing that I'll come on to is the material advantages the older people enjoy as compared to the young. The third theme that I'll talk about a bit after that is about the psychological dimensions of age war. And then the fourth theme, which is an implicit theme that we can sort of build looking at all of this, but there is a direct reference to age war as replacing class war in these articles. So greater political influence, you'll find themes such as there's a brazen defence of the old by the political class at the expense of the young, particularly the Conservative Party. Austerity is predominantly a young person's game, for example. The EU referendum results, the young are screwed by older generations. Thanks, Granny. There's an article that was entitled, I think a 2014 article, The Young versus the Baby Boomers, the Peasants' Revolt of Our Age? Question mark. It turns out, actually, if you do read the article, that even the columnist admits it really isn't the Peasants' Revolt of Our Age, which was a class revolt, but it's still influential emotionally, and it skews the whole tenor of the argument. I'm ashamed of my own mother. That was an article about someone's mother voting for, guess what, Brexit. And many millennials feel that the older generation has selfishly voted against the interests of subsequent ones. As many as 7 in 10 pensioners will vote Tory, was one article. The photographic imagery, I would say, is part of the rhetoric surrounding the presentation, the emotional presentation of this article. And, well, it speaks for itself, really. It's about conservatism. It's about a kind of, you might say, imperialist kind of, the kind of Miss Marple type old woman that reminds one perhaps of the kind of woman that would, and it's very much woman. I will come on to the gender dimensions of this as well later, but the older woman that would vote for Margaret Thatcher, perhaps. It seems very, very reminiscent of certain tropes and memes that have a sort of racist, empire, imperialist tone calculated to well, increase anger and a sense of alienation on the part of the younger generation. Family rifts over Brexit. I can barely look at my parents, and these are the sorts of images that appeared under the image of the older granny figures that I've just shown you. Theme 2, material advantages. Okay, no pay rise, blame the baby boomers' gilded pension pots. Pensioners living in golden era as income outstrips workers. There's things about house prices have locked out younger buyers. Older people have pulled up the ladder. So they've not only benefited from, I don't know, years of perhaps saving to pay off their mortgage, but they've actually pulled up the ladder. I'm not sure how you pull up the ladder, but they pulled up the ladder. It's time for Britain's millionaire pensioners to pay up. That's fine, except millionaire pensioners and pensioners seem to be used to mean the same thing, and they are very different, of course. Thank you, younger generation, for keeping us oldies. It should say out of pocket. I put in pocket there, but I meant out of pocket. And you can see that sort of image that I mentioned before, the laughing older person that could well be, if you look at the documents there, it looks like she's looking at her bank balance or something. And it just reminds me of the sort of gerontophobic images that we're finding in quite a lot of movies and literature. I mean, this came out, this image I found that was simultaneous to, I don't know whether any of you have seen M. Night Shyamalan, I don't know how you pronounce his name, Shyamalan's movie called The Visit, which was about how an older grandparent couple turned into the grandparents from hell during a visit and ended up sort of chopping off, trying to kill their grandchildren. It's very much a fairy tale theme. Hansel and Gretel springs to mind, for example, this wicked old grandmother enjoying herself at the expense of the young. again, you know, honestly, women appear 9 times out of 10 in the photographs that accompany these images. And I've talked to a friend who works for The Guardian, and she was very keen to assure me that it's not journalists that pick the images. I don't really know how this works. I know there's a photographic editor, but it still seems to me that there is something that needs to be done in that newspaper if they want to give a different impression of older people, because this is repeated and it remains the case. This kind of image of, there you are, an older person on the deck of a yacht, I suppose. And that certainly is not recognizable for many older people when they think about their grandparents. So psychological dimensions. It's the kind of idea that older people are selfish, they are causing suffering, they're short-sighted, and they are desperate to make millennials hate themselves in a kind of psychological warfare. And here's another quote: "Born into a bizarre world controlled by baby boomers who have comprehensively shafted us, it's a credit to our resilience and adaptability that we managed to get this far at all." And so this kind of age war, generational antagonism was linked to this idea that millennials see themselves as a result as greedy, self-absorbed and wasteful. So that's the psychological dimension of age war. So let me go quickly on to the so the final theme is age war replacing class war. And as I say, that is a feature that is not just an indirect result of the way that social problems and issues of inequality are presented in these newspapers, but it is a direct theme. And Owen Jones is very keen on presenting social problems in this light as an age war, really, as the new form of class war. So just passing on to the COVID-19 pandemic, to begin with, there was a more mixed kind of balanced view of this, and certainly older people are more at risk from COVID-19, especially the oldest old. But, you know, as time has emerged over the past year, older people have been represented as not suffering any consequences from lockdown and even managing to profit economically, unlike the young. And I'm going to talk about the Times here because, unfortunately, I no longer have my access to the Telegraph because it's behind a paywall, but I do have access to the Times. So the Times, lots of the economic policy of the Times is right-wing as well, but still, Lord Sumption and Max Hastings both say that, you know, we have to ask whether the economic downturn and the smashing of the economy is a price that we should be paying, because old people, many of them are going to die anyway, so why keep them alive a few months later? But I've been able to have a quick look at some of the Telegraph articles, not a thorough look. There's a big anti-lockdown theme running through the Telegraph, in which they've summoned up the spirit of age war in their arguments. So age war has very much passed into the Telegraph and therefore the right-wing mindset, specifically on this idea of anti-lockdown. Having said this, left-wing papers' response to COVID has continued the age war theme. There is some circumspection. I found several articles which say, you know, let us not be completely blinded by age war. Let's try to pull together. But many articles continue the theme of the advantaged boomers, particularly in terms of housing and the economic effects. Boomers are already dreaming of escape to the post-COVID sun. COVID-19 exposes stark generational housing divide. That's Polly Toynbee, I'd say one of their more prominent. There's another one, gilded post-war generation, which is a theme that's appeared throughout the coverage of age differences and generational injustice, has appeared in her article on the coronavirus crisis. And broader consequences of COVID have been that I'd say it's very much strengthened ageism, it's strengthened and hardened the age war discourse. And consequences have gone way beyond the kind of media rhetoric. And so a very popular meme that began circulating among young people in March 2020 includes the reference to COVID being a boomer remover. And a study of a random sample of Twitter in which the search terms were old, or various terms for old, and COVID-19 found that 3/4 of the tweets ridiculed older adults, and 1 in 10 suggested that the lives of older adults were less important. I want to mention quickly, and I think I haven't got that much time, have I, Gemma? So I
was just about to give you your 5 minutes.
5-minute warning. Okay. So there is a gendered aspect to this age war. I wasn't specifically focusing on the images of older women. You can't help but see that 9 out of 10 images feature older women in relation to the age war. And indeed, the life course is gendered. The idea, so this is another thing that's underplayed in sociological approaches to the life course. So, for example, when Peter Laslett constructed the third age as a category, he did it without reference to gender, and he did not note that the third age was more likely to be enjoyed by men who have the economic privileges that women don't have, just as the fourth age was mostly, that should be female. I'm so sorry I put male there. The fourth age is mostly female. Indeed, the greatest majority of people, more women have Alzheimer's and suffer from frailty, even bearing in mind the difference in longevity. So that's very much a gendered category, the fourth age. And this gendering has identified in late modernity. And I would say that it's a combination of ageism and sexism or misogyny that particularly lie behind these representations. There are various reasons that we can discuss this. The whole attitude, the use of abjection to specifically refer to both women, particularly the maternal female, but also women in general, and femininity in general, is a condition of our individualization, the objectification of femininity and the mother. I haven't got time to go into that as such, but Paul Higgs and Chris Gilliard have talked a lot about how the fourth age, for example, that associated with frailty and dementia, is associated very much with abjection, and abjection is something that makes the fourth age possible. And you will find that the sort of witch trope appears throughout that image of the hideous older person. But I don't have time to go into this in great detail. But some of the you get when people are trying to be sympathetic towards the fourth age, it's either, I would say, falls into two themes, either the fourth age in terms of horror or the fourth age in terms of pity. So baby boomers don't deserve to be punished is a sort of pity theme, and it's illustrated by these disembodied hands of a poor old woman and so on. And these are the sorts of images that I took from, I could have chosen multiple examples. The one on the left there is about the care home crisis during lockdown and the pandemic. On the right, the top right, is an old woman in her own home during lockdown, and the two bottom ones illustrate Guardian articles on COVID and old age and care homes. So very, very quickly going to my concluding thoughts. One below the line commentator in the Guardian said, when we're reading stories of Zimmer frames being thrown on bonfires and bombs underneath mobility scooters, we will know there's blood on the hands of the Guardian. This below the line commentator felt that the Guardian was stoking the flames of age war to such an extent that this might well happen. Those who gain from these discourses are not the young, but all who benefit from a scaled down social infrastructure. If we actually pit old against young, we cease to be able to focus on the common enemy, which is that of government policy, multinational corporations that have no interest in welfare or pensions, and that disinvest in so-called human capital. As I say, these discourses do seem to be hardening, and so age war does seem to be taking ever stronger root. And it does potentially reduce the likelihood of a social policy towards aging equipped to meet the challenges of super-aging society, something that Alan Walker pointed out in the Journal of Social Policy. It is therefore a very deeply conservative approach, which you know, it goes along with the Guardian's idea of, you know, the left has always championed the young against the old, because the young have always been associated in political revolutions with the new order, replacing the stale older order. It's very much a Freudian idea as well, if you think about it, of, you know, fighting against the father. But it is deeply conservative to the extent I don't think that these commentators realise. And it also indicates the degree to which gender equality as a norm seems to have an expiry date in life course terms. For example, the cenocide that occurred in our care homes wasn't just a cenocide, it was a female cenocide, because 2/3 of the people that died were female. And that's just a quick kind of image of the article. If you want to read a bit more about this, the article that was published online in 2018 and on paper in 2019. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was absolutely fascinating. And it's really great that you, I don't know how you found the time to do it, to bring it a bit up to date for the COVID era as well. And as you know, I've been doing some work in that, and I have to say I agree with 99% of what you said there. But before I start getting into questions, I'd like to introduce our discussant, who is Angel Leira Pernas, who is heavily blacked out here with the
darkness.
So over to you, Angel. We'll leave our little videos on because we're on to the chat session now.
Okay, thanks, Gemma, and sorry everyone for this. It's an unusually bright day in Belfast, but my camera doesn't reflect that. And thank you very much, Susan, for being here today. I really enjoyed, I told you before, and I really enjoy your article, and I really enjoy your talk today. So I'm just going to talk about two things that maybe you can discuss with us, or maybe some of the attendees can as well discuss. So the first one is about this analytical distinction that you make between third and fourth age, because when I was reading the article, you made me notice this contradiction between two opposing ideological narratives of aging, which is, in the one hand, we have the old privilege, like, you know, selfish old people, you know, in cruise trips, in nice houses, whereas young people is the precariat. And on the other hand, we have this narrative of the fragility, the decline, like old age dominated by disease, dementia, and all that, as an undesirable stage of life. So they both seem contradictory to me. You know, either you have you live a careless, good life of spending money, or a sad and fragile life. So it seems to me that the division between third and fourth age, which is, well, you explained it very well, is commonly justified as with medical and allegedly objective reason, also enables these two narratives to coexist. You know, if you want to, I don't know, if you want to sell medical insurance or death insurance, you use the narrative of decline. If you want to cut pensions or lobby to cut pensions, you use the narrative of all privilege. So you mentioned this during your talk, so but maybe you know, you want to expand a bit later in this analytical distinction between third age and fourth age as something that enables these two contradictory narrations of age. And the second thing I would like to discuss has to do with the response to this representation that you just showed us. You know, so let's see if I can explain it. So. Politics are based on messages, and politicians try, above all, what politicians try to do is to mobilize their own voters, and they try to send clear messages to who they think are their voters. So you showed it today that if we analyze polls, at least in Europe and in the United States, of correlations between belonging to a group identity and voting for a political option, it seems that one of the most clear that we will find is age. So, it's, if you are young, you are probably more likely to vote Labour, you voted for Remain, and vice versa. So it seems that the political left, which is in an electoral crisis in the UK, and the media progressive liberal left that you showed us, has decided to start playing this dangerous game to mobilize their voters. But what I want to ask you is, it seems that they are constructing this new aging narrative, but can you see something happening from the other side? Because it seems to me that the right is sort of embracing this type of symbolization of old age in the political struggle. And the message from the right are also targeting an age group. So, we have new categories emerging online, especially if you are in Facebook and in social media, you can see it. We have boomers, but we have as well snowflakes, these young, politically correct PC young people who gets easily offended, who cannot deal with real life. So that would be my second question. If you want to discuss on this, the response to this phenomenon from the right, how the right is targeting as well old people towards younger generations, which will actually make it a class war, if you know what I mean, which will those would be my two questions for you, Susan, if you want to comment, or if someone else from the attendees.
Shall I very briefly, because I think, Angel, thank you very much for that. I talked too much, but I'll just very, 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 very briefly respond to what you've said. Firstly, about the narrative contradictions, I think paradox, Mary Poovey pointed this out, paradox and contradiction is fascinating. It shows the fault lines of both capitalism and modernist ideology. And I think, there's a study in itself at looking at the contradictions, how two totally incompatible ideas are nevertheless held side by side by the same people, indeed. I think, though, that when you talk about the contradictions between the third age and the fourth age, what both of them do is indicate the lack of value of old age per se, the lack of value and meaning. So the third age is valued because it's not old age, it's basically an extended youthful middle age. And the fourth age is the kind of rubbishy, obsolescent, senescent old age. So old age itself, across these contradictions, is something that is lacking in meaning and value. So we don't have this idea that each life stage has a value of its own, that there's a meaning, there is something about maturity and about even extreme old age that can be useful, enlightening, rich. So, for example, one of the things I would really like to do is do a study of how older people have helped younger people during COVID in terms of philosophies. Older people have gone through wars, some older people have. My own mother has gone through the Spanish Civil War. My mother's Spanish, by the way. And she was 3 when the Civil War ended. She's 88 now. And during this pandemic, she was like the rock of the family because she knew she'd been through it all before and it was nothing to worry about. So, but we deny both of these, both the third and fourth age deny the idea that the very, very old have anything that they can contribute to society. So that's what I'd say about that. I could say a lot, but that's all I'll say about that for now. And yes, definitely the right is jumping in, but it serves the right really well because it completely, it's like, look that way, and actually they're really sheltering and hiding behind this because the government is its own role in it, and fairness is less visible than it would be otherwise. It's a shame that progressives are doing this, but I think there's a very strong history going back to Freud and before that of why the young seem so important, and that that they are posed against the old rather than.
Yeah, if I can come in there and say that, and of course the real tragedy is that those young people will become old and will be subject to the same regime that they've supported when they were younger, which is basically ageist, which is why ageism is such a facile philosophy. It just doesn't work. But anyway, not good. I just think that was a great question, Angel, really good.
Absolutely.
There was a question in the chat, or Kate Samuels had raised her hand. I don't know if she's able to speak. Let me see if I can find her here in the list. Kate.
Hello?
Yeah, okay. Did you have a question, Kate?
Yeah, well, I was going to say the chat was disabled. I don't know if anyone else was having the same issue, but I did have a question as well.
Oh, that's annoying. That's happened to us before. Let me see if I can allow people to talk then. Or maybe.
Yeah, so I can maybe ask a question just now, if that sounds good.
Yeah, go for it.
So basically, I work in Generations Working Together, and we're kind of helping to lead the Intergenerational Week. And it's been really fascinating listening to what you've kind of said about the media, Susan, because that's a question I get kind of very often, you know, how can we change this? How can media be less ageist? How can we stop them using, you know, these images? And I think as much as we try, there's still that little bit of when we have dialogue with the media where they say, no, but, you know, we need to use these photos. We've been told to specifically kind of quote things like this. There's a specific narrative. So are there any kind of tips based on what you've learned to challenge that?
Thank you very much. That's a really interesting question. I mean, Amelia Hill writes great articles that are very fair in The Guardian, but her articles are almost invariably accompanied by these same derogatory images. I mean, one of the things is that, I mean, again, Tom Sharp has pointed this out, hasn't he, Gemma, in several seminars. One of the things that the media could be aware that it's doing, Kate, is not use disembodied, you know, hands, the big arthritic knuckled hands going in the tiny purse that probably has nothing in it, or, you know, the disembodied head with the wheelchair at the back. You know, all these kinds of images are almost the same images that you get when people do studies of sexism in the media. They are reducing people to their body parts. They are dehumanizing people. That is something that really needs to be challenged. I think there's been campaigns against that kind of sexist slant in the media, but we need to set up a campaign, maybe an everyday ageism type of thing that you know, gets traction, perhaps by having lots of people signing up to it. I know Margaret Morgan Roth-Gillette had this idea that we should have an everyday ageism blog, and I don't know.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so that disembodied approach is particularly bad, but you know, I don't really understand why The Guardian can't see it themselves. It's very, very odd. It would be great to, I don't know if anybody has any access to the people that work in high-level newspapers, photographic editors, and just basically asking them why they do it. I would love to know.
I think that's our next project, Susan. Julia Twigg do a brilliant job of that with the fashion editors.
Yes.
And we need to do it with the news editors too. But I don't know, but I've noticed that with COVID, it's been really interesting because there's so much evidence of intergenerational solidarity because all the young people have stayed at home. They have done
absolutely.
The older people. The government have failed the older people, but not the ordinary everyday people have stayed at home. So that shows to me the level of solidarity that exists within the family structure. So the press is now out of line. So the question that I had, and Anne-Marie Gray, did you have a question?
No, Gemma, no.
Oh, no, I thought you were going to ask a question. So the question that I had for Susan was, to what extent do you think this just exists in the press and in the media? Because it's so, I know from work that I've done before, as well as what I've just observed about COVID, there's actually very strong evidence of solidarity between generations, and that this is a phony war.
Yes, absolutely, Gemma. But well, first of all, I think that people are, again, they're able, like Angel observed to hold two contradictory ideas in their heads at the same time. This is an idea I think that younger people tend to hold generally about older people. And of course, I didn't say it in the presentation, but when I mean older, it could be people from their 40s upwards. It's a very, very flexible, commodious category. It could be anybody from even 35 upwards, as well as the boomers, as well as the very old. So they have this abstract idea, but not when it comes to the people they know, certainly not their own family. So because we have this discussion, I teach age studies every year, and we have this discussion with my 19-year-old students, and they all really buy into this idea of generational unfairness. But then I say, do you feel the same about your grandparents, your own grandparents? Are they privileged? Are they all, oh, no, not my grandmother. She's, you know, she lives with us. She's got nothing, you know, and so they can hold that abstract and the particular as different in their heads at the same time, because that's how ideology works. Secondly, unfortunately, I do think it's becoming more, I think the media have started something that is now, as we saw from that Twitter study, it's appearing, you know, the idea of the boomer remover. I think that social media is now picking up this idea, and it is, you know, and of course the idea of snowflakes and so on, it's becoming a way, again, people in the abstract rather than people that they know. And it does, every year my students, I say something like, you know, we look at a paper, it's a great paper in the Atlantic, it's a pro and against. I think you should die at 75, says somebody age 70, and I think you shouldn't. That's life begins at 75, says the contravening article. 99% of the students at the end of always, I ask them to vote, they always say you need to die before you're 75. But then
that's because they're 19. That's
exactly. But not when it comes to their own friends and family.
Exactly. But that's been shown again and again that as people approach the date, they change their vote. Listen, can I just say that Vicky Titterington, who runs Linking Generations in Northern Ireland, had her hand up too. Did you have a question, Vicky?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
It was more just a comment and to pop in and sort of say that I'm here. Unfortunately, I didn't get all of the presentation because I have my 1-year-old at home today, and I kind of had it on the table while we were doing that. Yeah, just to kind of say, yeah, Linking Generations, we are with Generations working together on National Intergenerational Week, and we have done 3 webinars this week, kind of inspiring and showcasing, you know, how generations have kept connected. So I do think there is a bit of a disconnect between real life and then what the media portrays. And I think it's a very dangerous one, because coming out of COVID, particularly, you know, there is like a lot of fractures now between generations in communities, especially with settings being, you know, the doors are closed. And I think the media is making it worse. And just to mention, I don't know if it had been mentioned in the presentation before, but I have been involved in a workshop with the Generations Welcome Network, and they have released a paper during Intergenerational Week, which is talking about generations. And it was all to do with the way we describe generations and the words that are used, and the document makes suggestions as to how scholars, academics, policymakers and the media can change how we talk about generations. And I found the workshops a little bit frustrating, because I come from that kind of where we're trying to break down the age barriers and keep people connected. But yes, it's an interesting document, and I'm happy to, you know, maybe share that link with everybody.
I'd love to see that. I'd love to read it, Vicky.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I just when we're working at the community level, and like the 3 webinars we had this week really reminded me of why I do the work. We had our care home one today, and it was just inspirational, the things that are still happening, even though, you know, COVID is going on. But and there is such enthusiasm. We had 38 people on today. People were on with their kids and everything. Care home activity coordinators at home. So there is a great enthusiasm at a local level. But I think this idea of, you know, in the media, it is dangerous. And you know, as an organisation trying to kind of be part of the solution coming out of COVID, it's not really helpful.
I think the message is to keep going, Vicky.
Absolutely.
Yes. Work, because what happens at the community level is so much more realistic in terms of people's lives. It's what actually, you know, changes things. Did anybody else have any more questions? I just noticed it's 2 minutes past 3, And I think the head of department at the School of Sociology in Liverpool possibly deserves a cup of tea on Friday afternoon.
Hey, I've got some brandy here. Yes.
Sounds good.
So any more questions?
No, just to say, Gemma, it was really brilliant, and thanks so much to Susan and to Angel. It was really great presentation.
Okay, gives loads
Thank you very much.
Anne-Marie studies younger people. She works with us in ARK. So we have a lot of crossover because.
Well, can I just say that this kind of rhetoric doesn't, as I said, doesn't serve young people well either. Just think of the idea in Silicon Valley, for example, that you have to be young to be a good tech worker, and you're past it at 40, and yet the heads of tech companies are in their 70s in some cases. So they, there's this contradictory discourse throughout the life course. I think part of the idea, part of the suffering that young people are going through is this idea that youth is the best time of your life. Therefore, right now, it feels particularly bitter and miserable and wretched that they're going through this pandemic and lockdown. But actually, I don't think youth is the best time of your life. That's a form of ideology that many people have tried to combat. But it does, my students say to me, this idea that we should be at our best and being happy and fulfilled now is causing us a lot of anxiety and depression because it's not how life feels. So these discourses, affect people at all points in the life course, including young people. I just wanted to sort of get that in.
Very good point. I think we should have a follow-up event where we bring in another speaker from that side as well, and we try and get some of that more positive, more constructive and actually genuinely progressive language, and
yes,
kind of make that. So listen, I think I'm going to let people go. Thank you so much, Susan. As I expected, absolute star, and really enjoyed that. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Back on Zoom again on Monday, so try and be in the garden or something this weekend. Thanks a million. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.